The wedding dress felt like a burial shroud. Aria Winter stood in the guest room of the Cortez mansion, staring at her reflection in the floor-length mirror. The gown was beautiful, vintage lace with delicate pearl buttons running down the spine, but it might as well have been made of iron chains. Each breath felt like lifting a weight she wasn't strong enough to carry. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother Elizabeth whispered from the doorway, her voice breaking. The oxygen tank beside her wheezed softly, a constant reminder of why Aria was doing this. Stage 4 lung cancer. Experimental treatment that cost $500,000. Treatment that only Damien Cortez could afford. "Mom, don't," Aria said, blinking back tears that threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "Please don't cry. I'm doing this willingly." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But lies were all they had left. The ceremony took place in the mansion's grand ballroom with fewer than 30 guests, mostly Damien's business associates and his father Victor, a man whose cold eyes had assessed Aria like livestock at auction. There was no music, no flowers beyond a single bouquet of white roses that looked more like a funeral arrangement than a wedding decoration. Aria walked down the makeshift aisle alone. Her mother was too weak to accompany her, and her father had abandoned them years ago. Each step toward the man waiting at the makeshift altar felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. Damien Cortez stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face carved from stone. At 36, he was devastatingly handsome, tall with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes so dark they looked black in certain light. But there was no warmth in those eyes as he watched her approach. Only cold assessment. The officiant rushed through the vows with mechanical efficiency. When it came time to exchange rings, Damien slid a platinum band onto her finger without looking at her face. His hands were cold. When Aria placed the matching band on his finger, her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped it. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said. Damien leaned forward and pressed his lips to Aria's forehead, not her lips, in a gesture that felt more like a dismissal than a kiss. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Victor Cortez smiled, a thin expression that held no joy. The reception was worse. Aria sat at the head table while Damien stood across the room, drinking scotch and discussing pharmaceutical patents with his associates. He didn't look at her once. When guests approached to offer congratulations, they found only Aria, alone, forcing smiles that felt like they were cracking her face. Victor approached her during dinner, his presence like a cold shadow. "My son is doing your family a tremendous favor," he said quietly, his voice carrying a threat beneath its politeness. "I hope you understand what's expected of you. You will be a perfect wife in public. You will not embarrass this family. And you will not expect anything beyond what you've been given, your mother's medical bills paid. That is the extent of this arrangement." "I understand," Aria whispered, her throat tight. "Good." Victor's smile was cruel. "Damien has very specific tastes. You are not one of them. Remember that." As midnight approached, the few guests departed. Aria's mother had been taken home hours earlier by a private nurse Damien had hired. Now Aria stood alone in the massive foyer as Damien finally acknowledged her existence. "Follow me," he said curtly, heading up the grand staircase. Aria's heart hammered as she followed him down a long hallway lined with expensive art she was too nervous to appreciate. He stopped at a door, pushed it open, and gestured for her to enter. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in cold grays and blacks with a massive bed that looked untouched by human warmth. Damien walked to the bar in the corner and poured himself another scotch. "This is your room," he said, not looking at her. "Mine is down the hall. You'll find appropriate clothing in the closet. A stylist will come tomorrow to ensure you have everything you need for public appearances." "Public appearances?" Aria's voice came out smaller than she intended. Damien finally turned to look at her, and the contempt in his eyes made her step back. "Did you think this was a real marriage? You are here because my father insisted I improve my public image. A wife makes me look stable, trustworthy. That's all you are, window dressing. I didn't ask for this, Arya said, finding a spark of anger beneath her hurt. You offered to help my mother. I thought. You thought what? That I wanted you? Damien's laugh was harsh. Let me be very clear. I don't want you. I don't desire you. And I certainly don't love you. He set down his glass and walked toward her, stopping just close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with scotch. Don't ever expect my touch again. What happened at the altar was for appearances. In private, you are nothing to me. The words hit like physical blows. Arya felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. You will attend events with me when required, Damien continued coldly. You will smile, be charming, and play the devoted wife. But in this house, we are strangers. Stay out of my way, and we'll get along fine. He brushed past her toward the door. I have an early meeting. Don't disturb me. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. Arya stood frozen for a long moment before her legs gave out. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her wedding dress, and finally let the tears come, silent, devastating sobs that shook her entire body. This was her wedding night. And she had never felt more alone. The morning light filtering through the heavy curtains woke Arya from a restless sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then reality crashed back. The wedding dress lay crumpled on the floor where she'd finally managed to remove it at 3 in the morning. Her wedding ring caught the sunlight, mocking her with its cold gleam. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Cortez? Breakfast is served in the morning room. Arya found clothes in the closet exactly as Damien had promised, expensive designer pieces in her size, all in muted colors. She dressed in a simple gray dress and followed the housekeeper downstairs to find Victor Cortez waiting, not Damien. My son has left for work, Victor said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. He works very hard to maintain the Cortez empire. I expect you to remember that when you're tempted to make demands on his time. Arya sat silently, accepting coffee from the hovering staff member. You will attend a charity luncheon on Friday, Victor continued. The stylist will prepare you. All you need to do is smile and not embarrass us. Can you manage that? Yes, Arya said quietly. The days blurred together. Damien left before dawn and returned after midnight. They never ate together, never spoke. Arya was a ghost in the enormous mansion, drifting through rooms filled with priceless art and empty of human warmth. But on the third day, she discovered the studio. It was on the 4th floor, hidden behind a door she'd assumed was locked. Inside, she found an artist's paradise, floor-to-ceiling windows, easels, paints, canvases. Everything she'd dreamed of having. Dust covered most surfaces, suggesting it hadn't been used in years. Arya began spending hours there, painting to fill the hollow ache in her chest. She painted her mother's face, her childhood home, abstract expressions of the loneliness consuming her. A week into her marriage, she worked late into the night, so absorbed in her painting she didn't hear the door open. Who gave you permission to be here? Arya spun to find Damien in the doorway, still in his suit but with his tie loosened. His face was hard, but something flickered in his eyes as he looked at her canvas, a storm of purples and blues that somehow captured the feeling of drowning. I'm sorry, Arya said quickly. I didn't think anyone used this room. I'll leave. Wait. The words stopped her. Damien moved closer, studying her painting with an intensity that made her nervous. This is remarkable. Who taught you? I taught myself mostly. I was studying art before. She trailed off. Before you married me, Damien finished, his voice strangely quiet. He reached out as if to touch the canvas, then pulled back. My mother painted. This was her studio. The confession hung between them. It was the first personal thing he'd shared. "I'm sorry," Arya whispered. "I didn't know. I can stop." "No." Damien's voice was rough. She would have liked knowing someone was using it again. He turned to leave, then paused. "She died when I was 15. Cancer." And suddenly, Arya understood something. "Is that why you agreed to help my mother?" Damien's shoulders tensed. "Good night, Mrs. Cortez." He left without answering, but Arya. Unexpected connection. The charity luncheon was as awful as Arya had anticipated. She smiled until her face ached while wealthy women sized her up, their questions dripping with false sweetness. "How did you meet Damien? So suddenly married. You must tell us everything." Damien stood across the room, his hand possessively on her lower back when photos were taken, but his eyes distant. Playing the role perfectly. But something had shifted since the night in the studio. Damien began leaving his office door open when he worked late. Arya would pass by and find him rubbing his temples, surrounded by documents. One night, she brought him coffee without asking. "Thank you," he said, surprised. Then, after a pause, "How is your mother?" It was the first time he'd asked. Responding well to treatment, Arya said softly. "Because of you." Damien looked at her then, really looked at her, and something raw crossed his face before he shuddered it away. "I'm glad." They began talking, cautious conversations about nothing important. But gradually, the wall between them developed cracks. Damien asked about her painting. Arya asked about his work. They circled each other like wary animals, neither willing to admit they were lonely. One evening, Arya was in the studio when Damien appeared with Chinese takeout. "You missed dinner," he said. "I thought you might be hungry." They ate sitting on the paint-splattered floor, and for the first time, Damien smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Why were you so cruel that first night?" Arya asked before she could stop herself. The smile died. Damien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "My father believes in controlling everything and everyone. If he thought I cared about you, he'd use you to control me. It was easier to make you hate me." "I don't hate you," Arya whispered. Damien's dark eyes met hers, and the air between them suddenly felt charged. He reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Arya's breath caught. "I should," she added softly. "But I don't." Damien leaned closer, his thumb tracing her jaw. "Arya." The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he expected her to pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned into him instead, it deepened into something desperate and hungry. His hands tangled in her hair while hers gripped his shirt, both of them clinging to each other like drowning people finding shore. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. For hurting you, for making you feel worthless. You're not. You're extraordinary." Arya's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you saying this now?" "Because I can't pretend anymore," Damien said, his voice raw. "Because every day I watch you paint, watch you be kind to staff my father treats like servants, watch you be stronger than anyone I've ever known, and I realize I'm falling in love with my own wife." The shift between them was both terrifying and exhilarating. Damien still maintained distance in public, but in private, he sought Arya's company. They had dinner together, talked for hours, shared pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden. But Victor noticed the change. "You're getting too close to her," he told Damien during a business meeting Arya accidentally overheard. "Remember why she's here. Don't let emotions compromise the plan." "What plan?" Arya demanded, stepping into the room. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Damien, control your wife. Tell her," Damien said quietly, his jaw tight. Or I will. Victor's smile was cruel. Your mother's treatment. The hospital is mine. I'm on the board. One word from me, and her experimental treatment ends. So Damien will continue being the perfect son, and you will continue being the obedient wife. Otherwise, Elizabeth Winters dies. Arya felt the world tilt. She looked at Damien, saw the guilt and rage warring in his expression. You knew about this? I'm going to fix it, Damien said desperately. I swear, Arya, I'm going to. You lied to me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything. Everything you said was real, Damien interrupted fiercely. My feelings are real. But my father has been controlling me my entire life, and I'm done. I'm choosing you. Choosing her means destroying everything I built, Victor snarled. The company, your reputation, your mother's legacy. My mother would hate what you've become, Damien shot back. What you've made me become. He turned to Arya, taking her hands. I'm selling my shares. Walking away from the company. Your mother's treatment will be transferred to a different hospital. I have colleagues who will ensure she gets the best care. We'll leave Boston, start over somewhere else. Just us. You'd give up everything? Arya whispered. Everything I have means nothing if I lose you, Damien said. I love you. I'm so desperately in love with you that I can't breathe when you're not near me. Please, Arya. Give me a chance to prove it. Arya looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, raw, vulnerable, terrified of rejection. This proud, cold man was offering her everything. Yes, she breathed, and his lips crashed into hers with fierce relief. That night, Damien led her to his bedroom, their bedroom now. His hands trembled as he undressed her, worshipping every inch of her skin with kisses and whispered apologies. When they finally came together, it was tender and passionate, a physical expression of everything they'd been denying. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Arya felt whole for the first time since her wedding day. I'm never letting you go, Damien murmured against her hair. Never again. Victor fought them at every turn, but Damien was his father's son in ruthlessness when it mattered. He exposed Victor's manipulation to the board, transferred Arya's mother to a world-class facility funded by Damien's personal fortune, and walked away from Cortez Pharmaceuticals with enough money to start fresh. They moved to a small coastal town in Maine, where Damien started a consulting firm helping ethical pharmaceutical companies, and Arya opened an art studio offering free classes to local children. Their second wedding, the real one, took place on a beach at sunset with only Arya's mother and a handful of close friends. This time, when Damien said, I do, his voice shook with emotion. This time, when he kissed her, it was deep and loving and full of promise. On their wedding night in the small cottage they'd rented, Damien carried her over the threshold and set her down gently. I want to do this right, he said. I want to worship you the way I should have from the beginning. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his hands and lips exploring every curve while whispering words of love and devotion. When they made love, it was different from before, slower, deeper, more intimate. They took their time learning each other's bodies, discovering what made the other gasp and moan. I love you, Damien breathed as they moved together, their bodies perfectly synchronized. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, Arya gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders as pleasure built between them. I choose you. Every day, I choose you. They came together, crying out each other's names, and in that moment, Arya understood that she'd never been unwanted. She'd just been waiting for someone brave enough to choose love over fear. Months later, sitting on their porch watching the sunset, Damien pulled Arya close. Do you regret any of it? The pain, the loneliness, all of it? Arya thought about the girl who'd walked down the aisle feeling like she was going to her execution. She thought about the cold, lonely nights in that mansion. But she also thought about the man beside her now, the one who had chosen to burn down his entire life rather than lose her. No, she said honestly. Because it led me here. To you. To us. Damien kissed her temple. Best decision I ever made, marrying you. You mean the second time, Arya teased. No. Damien turned her face to his eyes serious. The first time too. I just didn't know it yet. But somewhere deep down, even when I was being cruel, I knew you were going to change everything. And you did. He kissed her deeply as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, and Arya knew she was finally home. The end.